Welcome to another CEO Wisdom podcast. We have Brett Johnson with us. Brett is a quite accomplished guy. He's the CEO at Benevolent Capital, chairman of Rhode Island FC, director and shareholder at Ipswich Town FC, and PHX Rising FC. He's in the LA area, and him and I were talking about, the LA fires, the Palisades fire. I had a friend that's house also burned there. Then we were talking about grit and resilience, which has been a theme throughout his career. Serial entrepreneur, Harvard Business School educated, top guy. So we're going to have fun today. Podfire is presenting that one. Podfire is my company. If you want to launch your own podcast and monetize it, we help you do so with YouTube AdSense, paychecks on a monthly basis, getting sponsors to pay you, and also generating leads for your podcast. So podfire.com, we have an ebook and a masterclass for you. Brett, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
Yeah, good to see you, Charles, and thanks for the opportunity. Spend a little time with you. Moving on, if you will, from obviously the last several weeks and what I've been focused on with the unfortunate events in the Palisades. As I like to say, I'm blessed in terms of what I do and who I get to do it with. I view myself as an entrepreneur at heart, and I have a diversity of different ventures. I spent a lot of time on professional sports as an asset class. It started in Phoenix. It then extended to this club, Ipswich Town, which we've been successful in returning after back-to-back promotions to the Premier League. And then I do a lot on the East Coast in the state of Rhode Island. I have a stadium that we are close to completing, a 10,500 seat stadium that'll open up in May. I have a professional men's soccer team called Rhode Island Football Club that plays in the United Soccer League, which to your audience that might not be familiar with the soccer pyramid in the United States, the second level in professional soccer in the United States. And developing a substantial amount of real estate around that project and other markets. And then my identical twin brother and I have a family office where we focus on private equity and venture capital. And we do it it's called Benevolent Capital. We do it in a truly benevolent fashion. We do not charge management fees from our investors. We provide them 100% preferred returns on their investment before we take a promote. And we always put our own money in every deal. So Benevolent has now a portfolio which includes Aura Ring, which is the leading wearable, Athletic Brewing, which is the leading non-alcoholic beer, craft beer in the United States, another exceptional investment. But in short, when my brother and I see something that we like or an entrepreneur that we have faith, and if the product and the mission resonates with us, and we think it truly has exponential return potential, we'll always invest our own money, and then we'll set up an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, and we'll syndicate capital into the investment.
So you seem to be at the intersection of real estate and sports. Real estate, is it because it's so predictable and it's intergenerational wealth? And sports, is it the competitive serotonin aspect of it?
Yeah, I always say, relative to my journey, I didn't get involved with sports for an ego play. It's about a return on investment. I believe in the power of sports as an asset class. I also say often that none of it's for the faint of heart. You need to be very dedicated to it. It's a full-time job. It can't be a hobby. But a lot of sports is very closely associated with real estate. So my project in Rhode Island, we're going to develop housing around the stadium. We're going to create a true 365-day-a-year live, work, play community that will be the sports and entertainment capital for the state and beyond. And then, Ipswich Town, which is my English club, we should develop some assets around the stadium at some point. It would, if we can, it would make sense. Maybe a hotel, maybe some other assets, but sports has a transformative ability to change the economy. Since we bought Ipswich and restored it back to the Premier League, the amount of, I would say, jobs and economic activity in an area that was seeing kind of the exact opposite has been substantial. And my Rhode Island project, it's now, I believe, arguably the largest, certainly privately financed project in the state of Rhode Island. That's between the team that we invested in the stadium that we're building. We have a fair bit of public support as well. but sort of this public-private partnership, the amount of jobs that it's creating, and what I'll say is the social and economic impact of the right sports anchored development can really be substantial. And it's one of many things I'm very proud of in terms of what I get to do.
A $400 million project. I am an athlete. I love watching sports, not games, but Netflix mini documentary styles in which you can see the player on the field, off the field, in the locker room. Right, it's so interesting to see the mindset, but it also got me to reflect. For example, today I was watching rugby series, forgot what it's called on Netflix, but the cultural effect, right? People rally behind these teams. It's the camaraderie. It unites people. How would you describe these phenomena in society of people just like forgetting everything, work, their responsibilities, going to the stadiums and cheering for their team?
Yeah, no, sport, there's nothing like sport in terms of providing what I would say is positive, uh, uh, you know, a positive, I guess, vehicle for a community. And and so many individuals just need sport in their lives. It really has the ability to unify communities, bring it together, inspire communities. And so I think increasingly in this world of ours, sport has become even more and more important to people, to communities, to family, to individuals. I know, and I say this all the time, we have a lot of places where we can place our time. We have a lot of places we could place our money. And I've seen firsthand with my family and myself and with my investors, um, there's little that compares to the utility that comes from an investment in sports, especially when it's doing well. And I've been very fortunate across the three teams, Phoenix Rising, Ipswich, and Rhode Island. My partners and I have seen, we have 8 cups in the last 6 years. We've won 8 trophies across those 3 portfolios. So we've certainly been very, very successful on the pitch. And so again, there's few things that compare to winning a championship, or in England getting promoted, to the Premier League. That's something that I will cherish for the rest of my life. But all that being said, again, I do it for an investment. I do a return on investment. But given the amount of time and effort you put into it, you might as well try to enjoy it as well. And again, when sports are going well, it's about as enjoyable an asset class as anyone will ever be involved with.
Right. And I'd love to measure the impact on how sports are influencing physical activity in society. Obesity is a huge problem, not only in the US, but where I am today in Mexico as well, pretty much all over the world, right? So the impact of having people live healthier and longer, but also the influence on their mindset, right? The grit, the competition, which is essential to scale any society. That is huge. You mentioned 8 cups and you're winning quite well in business as well. What is your roadmap? What is your playbook for winning in life and business, on the field, off the field?
So I subscribe to the theory of who, not how. Everything that I'm blessed to do, it's because I have surrounded myself with individuals that are far more talented and capable than I am. And if you get yourself around the right people and you have the right vision, you can make things happen. But the success for Ipswich, a lot of it goes to the gentleman who we brought in as the chief executive officer, Mark Ashton. He's been a brilliant CEO of Ipswich. If you look at my Rhode Island project, my partner since inception, he's the one who navigated getting the stadium built, juggling all the different stakeholders. So anything of true import, it really comes down to the people, and when I think about projects that I want to get involved with, first and foremost, the individual has to resonate, and I have to have faith and confidence that they're the right partner to help me get stuff done. I don't develop stadiums for a living. I don't develop real estate for a living. I don't run soccer teams for a living, but I find people around me that do all of those and do it quite well more often than not. And so again, it's my brothers and my number one book and recommendation, and we quote it every day, is Who Not How, which is a book by an author named Dan Sullivan, which I highly recommend. If anyone has not read it, it's worth the time. Anything you want to do in this life, you'll always figure out how to do it because you get the right individuals around you.
Yep, Dan Sullivan's a top guy, one of my top quote unquote mentors. You talked about ROI in sports and soccer slash football most precisely. How does soccer slash football ranks up against top sports, for example, real football, right? The NFL, or soccer, not soccer, basketball, right? I'm watching the Netflix series on that one as well. Have you measured the growth of different sports compared to one another and just did uh, uh, deduced slash concluded that soccer was a better investment than all these other sports?
It's all contextual, if you will, and the NFL is almost an ecosystem unto itself, given how large and how profitable it is, the increased media rights, and how that league is run with a very clear and defined salary cap. NBA is doing very, very well. Um, as I said, I'm very honored to be associated with Ipswich Town and obviously thrilled to be in the Premier League. I think if you're in soccer, in football, there's nothing like English football, and candidly, I don't think there's anything like the Premier League. But it's a very challenging business. The salaries are substantial. The level of competition in terms of the other team ownership is also substantial. So increasingly, for my efforts in the States, the reason why I like my project in Rhode Island is that on a relative basis, you can stand up a team, and if you have the right stadium, you should have a pathway to profitability, because the overall compensation of the players, I focus on younger players. I look to develop them. I look to, in an ideal world, find bigger and deeper pocketed clubs to sell their rights to in the future. And then we talked a little bit about real estate. Developing real estate becomes a high return on investment, sustainable driver that when you put it all together becomes a very important part of the mix, the return profile that you're looking for. So sports, everything is different, but a lot of the equity valuations continue to go up and to the right. And increasingly, I've been very focused on, as I like to say, I'm obsessed with the sustainability of professional sports or sports in general. I want to find assets that are profitable and that have recurring revenue streams, therefore recurring profitability. And increasingly, I really like the youth sports space. With my partner, we will make an investment in the next couple of months in one of the larger youth sports platforms in the United States. And I think that's very complementary to what I have in professional sports already. But I like it in particular because in general, it's uncorrelated to the broader economy. And in times of economic turbulence, said differently, in a recession, the asset class holds up better than other asset classes.
Right. You're speaking to a futurist type of human being today. What do you think of robots playing instead of humans and the best AI wins on the field?
I don't know why that would be compelling at all. It's the human element of it, to be honest. So, yeah, I mean, again, you build up relationships with specifically with these players. So I'm not quite sure in a AI driven robotics future, if watching, at the end of the day, you'd rather watch a LeBron James with Steph Curry, using basketball as an analogy. You'd rather watch Lionel Messi. I'm fairly confident in that than some programmed robot running, two sides of robots going against each other. So anyway, that's partly why I do believe that in sport, the power of sport is and people want the community of collecting together, of being in a stadium and cheering on. And there's something cathartic about, just as I said, people need it. They want it. They need it. They'll spend money for it. And so over time, it's not to say I have a healthy paranoia just in terms of how any of this stuff can be disrupted. But again, in general, the fan bases of these clubs, if you build them and truly create community and family-like environments, ideally, and you continue to invest in them, ideally, it should be able to go up and to the right.
Right. Just like myself, you've probably deconstructed LeBron, Messi, and all these top athletes. What lessons have you brought from them into your entrepreneurial and investor life?
So with my Phoenix team, which was my original Phoenix Rising, Didier Drogba, one of the greatest players in the history of soccer, of Ivory Coast and Chelsea, fame, he came and joined our ownership group, and he finished up his career with us. And one of the things that really stood out for me is he was, I think at that time, 40 years old, but he was still the first player to show up to practice. He was the last player to leave. No one worked harder than he did. And if there was one player who could have skated by on talent alone, certainly at that stage of his career, it would have been him. So I think, anything you hear, I mean, Kobe Bryant, God bless him, and may he rest in peace. His work ethic was just legendary, was truly legendary. And so I think over time, anyone who spends time in sport, what you recognize is, there is something relative to God-given talent, but that'll only get you so far. If you do not work hard, and you work hard every single day and kind of deal with setbacks, injuries, staying positive, having a bad night, et cetera. So I think sports is always such a great proving ground. I've learned, as I like to say, I've learned just as much on the playing fields as I've learned anywhere else in a classroom or a different environment. So there's something great about sports relative to being a motivator, if you will, as an entrepreneur. Because entrepreneurship's not for the faint of heart, but it's truly one of the greatest callings there is, in my opinion.
How do you choose your coaches, your players? What's your strategy to win games?
Good question. Been Mark Ashton, the CEO of Ipswich, that we brought in to be the CEO of Ipswich. To his credit, he truly, I think, discovered Kieran McKenna. Kieran McKenna was at Manchester United. But no one, we gave Ipswich, Mark Ashton specifically gave Kieran McKenna his first shot at being, the head coach, the manager of Ipswich. And he's had one of the most spectacular runs of form. So I think the credit goes to people other than myself. I feel more often than not, I've been very, very blessed. Maybe part of it's just luck in terms of finding the right talent that's produced results on and off the pitch. And more often than not, I've had to make a couple changes, coaching changes historically, but not many. And by and large, I do feel if it's not going right, then I do have a responsibility in these instances, to try to figure out what changes you would make. But there's few things I like, less than getting involved on that side of the business, if you will. I just pray that we get the right people and they do great things, and you give them the latitude to find the right culture, to define the right culture and get the right players in it and work in a system that can produce results. And again, more often than not, sometimes you just need patience. What I really dislike is how often teams are so quick to make changes that, today versus, 50 years ago. And Ipswich is a good example. We have some of the greatest managers in the history of English football, Sir Alf Ramsey, Sir Bobby Robson. I'm not sure those guys would have been given the latitude that they were given when, early in their career, in terms of having some rough seasons, yet still getting backed by the board and ownership. Like you're seeing some teams that are switching managers 3 times a season. That's insanity. I don't know, So I always say, don't let your kids go into being a, head coach. You're only good as your last game in too many instances.
And is choosing the best purely a money game? What other incentives can you give top players, top coaches, top staff to come and work for you?
Yeah, money's not the answer. It's part of it, but I say all the time, it takes almost as much money to put a bad team on the pitch as it does to put a good team. And you see it often, that the highest payroll doesn't always produce the best results. It's not a fait accompli that will get you, silverware, if you will.
Last question before you go. You invested in Aura Ring, in Athletic Brewing company. What was your thesis behind these investments, and how are these companies changing the world?
Yeah, so I tried the Aura Ring, I think right around when COVID hit, and I fell in love with it. Being able to track my sleep, my recovery. So it was one of these products that I said, I've got to find a way to invest in it. When I tried Athletic Brewing, it was the first time I drank a non-alcoholic beer that actually tasted good. And then, if you will, I guess to my credit, I found a way to invest in the company. And I say this all the time to those that are interested in becoming an entrepreneur or interested in, the reality is I've done all this stuff by just being an entrepreneur, by coming up with the ideas and then deciding to figure out how to make them a reality. So hopefully that serves as some inspiration. You don't always need a ton of capital. My first team was, relatively speaking, a low amount of capital to get up and running, and then grow from there. This investment initially wasn't that large, but then we raised a lot of money around it. So, but anyway, when I see something I like, I try to find a way to invest my own money, and then by extension then make it that I can bring others that would be interested to join me.
Love it. Have the same philosophy. Where can people find out more about you, Brett?
I guess through LinkedIn or through my benevolentcapital.com, which is my family office and my website for Benevolent.
That was Brett Johnson.